Hey guys, this is Kerry, and in this video we're going to be looking at doing something new with JavaScript where we change the style of an element instead of just its inner HTML or the source of a picture. So I opened up my JavaScript toolbox over here, and I've got the code for problem 1 open right here. So this is going to be a simple background changer when we click the button below. Click the button below to make the text color of the H1 purple. Oh, that's misspelled, so let's fix that, purple. And the background of the page to RGB 230, 200, and then 10. So we'll talk a little bit more about this part in a second, but let's get started with the first part. So we've got the JavaScript tags already open, and the JavaScript stuff is pretty similar to some of the videos we've seen before. In general, we're going to be interacting with some parts of the page, and we need to select those parts of the page. So let's start off with select the parts of the page we are going to interact with. The parts of the page we are going to interact with. So as soon as we say select, it should remind you of document.querySelector. So let's copy and paste that, and then let's think. I'm going to need to select the whole body, so I can change the background of the body. I'm going to need to select this H1, so I'll do another one of those. And then I'm going to be clicking this button to do it, so that's an interaction with that as well, so I'm also going to be clicking that button. So let's do that in order. So the first one was we wanted to change the background of the whole page. Which element gives us the background of the whole page? Well, that's the body, so I'm going to start by selecting the body and then storing that in the code word body. Next up, I'm going to think about selecting this H1 element, and maybe I will store that in the code word header. And since that's the H1 element on the page, that gives us that, I'll select using the element type H1. And then the button that we're going to click, maybe I'll just call it like clicker or whatever you want to call it. Probably button would have been an even better name. But I think I want to just highlight that the selector is button, so it selects the button. And then this word could be anything you want it to be, clicker, button, thing, carry, sky, whatever you want to call it, you can use for your variable name there. So next up, we think about, well, what's going to trigger changing these things? Well, that's an event. So we need to go to our JavaScript toolbox, and we need to grab our event listener. So I'm getting all 4 lines of the code, and let me go back to my problem 1. So create an event listener, and you don't have to add these comments, right? But it is really helpful because it lays out what we're really doing in the code. And then Command V will ugly paste that. So we use Command Shift V to pretty paste that into the file. And now we think about which element are we interacting with to trigger this event. Well, we're clicking on the button. So it's going to be the clicker that's getting interacted with, that button on the page. The event that's going to cause it to happen is a click. And then the function, let's see. The function is going to be some procedure that runs when we click this button. So when we click this button, let's just start with the first one. Click the button below to make the text color of the H1 purple. So to do that, we don't have a tool to do this yet. So I've actually added it to our JavaScript toolbox. So let's see. We're changing inner HTML. Well, that's not quite what we're doing. Changing the source of an image. That's not quite what we're doing. Changing the style of an element. That is what we're doing. So I'm going to take that. I'm going to copy and paste this line of code right here. So the element whose style we're going to be changing is an H1. Style is a set word, actually. Oh, and sorry, H1 is not right. We're not actually calling the H1 H1, right? The code word for that was header, so we have to fix that. That should be header dot. Now style always stays the same because that allows us to start to access those style properties that usually we'd be accessing inside of the CSS. And then the name of the property that changes the color of the text is actually just color in CSS. Like if we wanted to change the color of the text here, we would have done something like h1 color dot dot blue. But our goal is not to make it always blue. Our goal is to make it blue when we click the button, so we do it down here. So we say take the header, go into its style properties, take the color property, and then the value we want to give it is going to be blue in quotes, the word blue. And now let's refresh it. And I actually don't think I'm supposed to turn it blue. I'm supposed to turn it purple, so let me just change that to purple. I don't know why I said blue. So now when we click it, that turns purple. Now what we've seen is there's actually a number of ways to define colors inside of I guess, programming in general for your computer. So I'm going to go to Color Picker, and I want to illustrate the second part of this where it says something about RGB 230, 200, 10. So the way that your computer actually creates colors is every pixel on your computer, every little square of light, is actually built out of 3 diodes that can light up in red, green, and blue only. And it's crazy. It turns out that every color we see on our computer, even if it looks nothing like red, green, or blue, so something like this, is actually built out of a combination of red light from that, some amount of brightness of that red light, some amount of brightness of that green light, and some amount of brightness of that blue light. And these colors all combined, when those 3 lights are lit up, actually look like this color. But really, it's just a bunch of tiny red, green, and blue lights lit up with a variety of different brightnesses. So we can actually specify colors in programming using those red, green, and blue values. So this one actually has a red value, green value, and blue value of 201, 181, and 255. And if we do this, let me just show you here, we can make the background instead of turquoise, sorry, I like to say that silly, instead of turquoise, you can make the background equal to one that has this amount of red, this amount of green, and this amount of blue, and that will make it into the color that we just saw. So I'm going to leave that alone for now, because our goal actually is to have it so that when we click this, not only does the header change, but that the background becomes this color right here. And that color doesn't have a color keyword, so we're going to have to use this version of defining colors to do it instead. So let's see, which element on the page, let's go to our toolbox. We want to change the style of an element, so I'm going to take the same line of code and I'm going to paste it in. To change the background of the whole page, which element is that? Well, that's the body. And we actually called that body when we selected it, so we're using the body code word. We're going into the style list, style set of attributes, and the property that we're going to change this time is not color, it's going to be background. And the value that we're going to be giving that is, it looks like we're supposed to be giving it RGB 230 210. So let's see if that works. Yeah, it does. So that's pretty cool. Now, I also want to take advantage of having this layout here and show you that there's a number of other things that you could be doing. So you don't have to just change colors. You could say when the thing is clicked, take the header, take the style, change the font size to, I don't know, 40px, and you've got to include the units here. So now when we click it, it becomes a little larger. That wasn't very dramatic, so let's make it, I don't know, 90px. So now when we click it, we get a giant font. We could do some other stuff. Let's see, header.style. And it will actually drop out a list of different things that you can do. I don't know if yours is calibrated, your Sublime Text is calibrated the same way as mine is, but all of these are different options that you might want to use. So let's see, which one of these looks interesting? Maybe something like font family could be interesting, equals cursive. And I think that's supposed to be lowercase. So now when we click it, it becomes giant, cursive, and purple. And websites do this all the time. They're constantly changing the styles of things when you interact with them. So if, let's say you made a shopping list app and you had a certain item that when you clicked it, you had bought that item, it might turn that item, red to symbolize that you've already bought it or something. I'm trying to think of some other examples. Let's see, what would be some other examples of this? Well, you could probably think of some examples yourself, and I should have prepared some in advance. It's hard to think of on the spot. So now let's go on to our second one. Our second one is going to be a very similar project to this, but I want to show you something new with JavaScript that might be interesting as well. So this one is going to be a random background changer that changes the background every time you press a key on the keyboard. And I think this is a pretty cool one, pretty fun project to work on. So I'm going to start by deleting my JavaScript code and then giving you guys a chance to code that from scratch. So here now, when we press the button, nothing happens. So and our goal here is to press any key on the keyboard to change the background to a random color. So definitely a step up in terms of challenge. So let's go into our toolbox. And let's, well, no, we're not ready for the toolbox yet. Let's start thinking about what elements are we going to be interacting with on the web page. So we're changing the background of the page. That's the body element. So let's start by selecting the body element. At this point, I think I know it by heart. Let body equal document.querySelector. And then the thing that we're selecting is the body element. Next up, what we need to do is we need to add an event listener. So I'm going to go into my toolbox and add that event listener. Now, this actually throws us off a little bit because it's not a button that we're clicking. It's actually the whole window that's going to be listening for key presses. So there already is an object in JavaScript or in your web browser defined as the window. So whenever the window hears a key press event, we want something to happen. So let's start by changing it to a key down event. And then the function that we want to run, let's just alert something like key pressed and make sure that it's actually working. So now whenever we press a button, it should be alerting key pressed, but I forgot to refresh the page. Whoop, refresh the page. So nope, I didn't forget to refresh the page. Let's see what's wrong with our code. So we open up the JavaScript console, and we get out of this, and let's see, unexpected curly bracket. So in line 30, it's not expecting this one here. Oh, it's because they put a period right outside of the alert. That's a silly one. It should have been a semicolon. So now when we type any key, it just says key is pressed. But that's not what we want to have happen. What we want to have happen is to change the background to a random color. That's going to take a little bit more work to do for us. So I added some functions to the JavaScript toolbox related to randomness. JavaScript actually doesn't have a very good built-in random number generator, so I created a function for us to use. So this is an interesting thing in JavaScript. If the actual programming language itself doesn't come with a function that you want it to have, you're able to write your own function. So I wrote this generate a random number function, and you're going to take that and you're going to paste that into your JavaScript at the very top of the script file. And the reason why I'm doing this is this function doesn't actually, writing this code doesn't actually cause the function to run. It just creates a new keyword, kind of like event listener, that now later on I can use. It doesn't have to be at the top of the JavaScript file, but because I'm going to be using it later, I like to put it there in this example. So basically what this does is it creates a random number function. And then in my comment here, I say that if you use this function, it generates a random number from 0 to the max number. So the way that you use this function is you actually, I'm going to go into my event listener here. And instead of alerting a random key press, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say let red equal, because red, when I think about the color picker, this red amount is going to be a random number. So I'm going to say let red equal, and then I'm going to use my new generate random function, which you can see in the toolbox too, but I also wanted to type out. And then here I can generate any random number that I want from 0 to whatever number I put in the parentheses. So with the colors, it's actually 0 to 256 as possibilities. So I'm going to be generating a random number from 0 to 200, it's actually 255, to 0 to 255. So now when I load my page, instead of alerting a random number, I actually just want to alert whatever random number is generated, which is stored in the variable red. So save it, refresh it. This is the wrong one. Save it, refresh it. Refreshing I have to do without the key press, sorry. And now 204, 86, 234, H. So when we generate that random color, red is not the only thing we're generating. It's RGB, so it's a red amount, a green amount, and a blue amount. So I'm also going to generate a random number for green, same range of values, 0 to 255. I'm going to generate a random number for blue, same numbers, 0 to 255. So create random amounts of red, green, and blue. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to put them together, and maybe just can alert out these. So alert out red. That's what I had before. Let's see. I'm just going to say something like total color. So the total color is going to be equal to let total color equal RGB. Then it's going to be the red amount, the green amount, the blue amount, close the parentheses, semicolon. And then what I want to alert out is that random total color. So we go here, and now when we refresh it, it's going to alert out that, oh no, it kind of alerts out my red, green, blue, but red, green, and blue are the words red, green, and blue. So we actually wanted to plug in those random numbers there. So let me do that. To plug in those random numbers, we need to say start off with this, then add the code word red in, then add a comma, then add the code word green, which stands for the next random number, then add a comma, then add the code word blue, and then add a parenthesis. And so it looks like it's going to be RGB, the number, comma, a number, comma, a number, comma, the parenthesis. And this is actually a little hard to keep track of. There is an alternative way you can write this that I haven't shown you, that I'm regretting not showing you. But I don't want to introduce too much new stuff in this video, so I think this is good. So now when we refresh our page and we look at it, it now actually is alerting that random color. Now the last step of this is we didn't want to actually alert it. What we want to have happen is we want to set that property to that random color. Sorry. So I go into the toolbox. To change style, we take this one right here. And we want to make the body have a style that's the property background equal to not just some random value, but whatever that total color string was that we wrote before. Because that total color string is going to look a lot like, from problem 1, something like this, but with random numbers in those spots instead of what we had before. So now we refresh our page, and every time we press a key, it changes to a random color. And I think that that's a pretty cool example. So hopefully you had some fun with that. I'll see you guys in class on whatever day I see you next. Bye.